The next session. This session is on product stewardship, going beyond regulatory landscape. Shishir Kumra, Dr. Ms. Erika Kunz, Mr. Rahul Yadav, and Mr. Kushal Singh to kindly take the chair on this podium. The session will be chaired by Mr. Kumra. Mr. Kumra is an environmental law and policy expert with 28 years of experience in the areas of cleaner production, cleaner technology, sustainability management, support chemical policy and regulation, circular economy, regulatory representation, and setting up compliance management systems, and develop related tools for effective and efficient support to its clients. Mr. Kumra, as founder of GPC Group, has supported global compliance excellence efforts of 1,500 plus corporations. He was once actually also the consultant for Chemexil, and I recall meeting him in the ECHA meeting in Helsinki, the Helsinki Chemicals Forum in 2011. So it's been a long time, so please. Then we have Dr. Ms. Erika Kunz. She's a global product stewardship, head of global product stewardship at Clariant. Ms. Kunz earned a PhD in chemistry from Julius Maximilians Universität in Würzburg. She started her career in the R&D department for textile dyes at Kasselka Frankfurt am Main, Germany. Since 1998, she took on various responsibilities in global product safety and ecology at Dystar Textilfarben GmbH and Deutschland KG Frankfurt am Main. In 2010, Erika joined Clariant Productive Deutschland GmbH. Since January 2011, she has been responsible for global registration and evaluation of chemicals within the global product stewardship at Clariant. And since 2019, Erika is the head of global product stewardship at Clariant. Mr. Rahul Yadav is a product stewardship professional with more than a decade of global regulatory compliance experience. He currently serves as the Chief Manager for Gujarat Fluorochemicals Limited and oversees product stewardship functions specifically in relation to regulatory compliance, hazard communication, life cycle assessment, and safer chemistry initiatives. He holds a Master's in Chemistry from University of Mumbai. And then we have Mr. Kushal Singh, is the Director of CSR and Sustainability at Merck. He has a diverse experience of spanning around 2.5 decades in defense, real estate, financial services, and chemical industries. In his current role, he works very closely with sourcing teams and supplier partners to enhance supply chain transparency and decarbonization focused mainly on upstream Scope 3 emissions. Now, the panel is in your hands, Mr. Kumra.
Good afternoon. I will be, I have a couple of starting points that I want to share. One is that, when we are talking about sustainability, one of the things that we need to have, question sustainability for whom? Is it human-centric sustainability? Obviously, that is what we are looking for. And human-centric sustainability means that and that's why we are talking about this climate change and all this decarbonization and all those things and minimizing waste and pollution and other things. But one thing that we are not addressing is the effect on human. So human health was the only word used by Secretary Saab in the morning session and also by Madam from UNEP. Yeah? So these are the two. So human health has to be addressed, and I know that we are saying it in different ways, but not really openly mentioning it. And human health has to be the center of sustainability when it's specifically addressing the chemical segment. The second thing is that going beyond regulation. Which regulation we are talking about? Is it the regulation that is in other country where we are exporting, or is it in the regulation that we are dealing here locally? And then if we are talking about regulation in that way, that it is the local regulation that we want to comply with, what is the product stewardship of a company rather than of a position? Yeah, you know, where the regulation is not sufficiently developed, matured, it is not dealing with the key issues. The regulation last was developed in 1989, probably. Yeah, I don't know. But it has been quite old. Yeah, several regulations. Yeah. So I think what we did was that I have just want to share that there is this document in your bags. This is a white paper on why we should have chemical regulation, and it has the trade angle to it, human health angle to it, environmental angle to it, and at the same time try to address to not do the same extensive job that was done by Europe, which was a very extensive regulation, but I think that was necessary for Europe because they were the first to do it. The data on chemical was not available. Information on chemicals were not available. Only 4,000 to 5,000 chemicals that were actually supposed to have full chemical data. And now, when we are here now, when we have this information from all those countries, we don't need to redo the entire extensive way of doing things. So the idea is that we should at least have some form of information system with the authorities from whom we expect them to make sure that we have a good chemical sector, a competitive chemical sector. And before I start with the first presentation today, I want to also say that we have a lot of good examples today and a lot of fantastic examples, and these are all leaders in their own sector. But I mean, they are only top notch from the top of the pyramid. Most of the sector is not doing that. So with these type of changes, are we able to achieve the things that are at the bottom? The third scope we mentioned. Third scope, I mean, when it comes to European reach, we are the third scope. We comply with European reach because we are the downstream user, we are the supplier to that supply chain. So the regulation there is affecting us and we are actually complying with it. But we are not doing the same thing here. So our compliance is actually benefiting somebody else, somewhere else, the human health of those citizens. What happens to our own citizens here? So that's a few thoughts, but I think if you go through this document, it gives you much more rational why we should have a particular, some sort of management of chemicals and where we address the human health and environment issues. And definitely then we can go beyond and see, but some companies have already done the compliance, they have already done a very fantastic job, and we want to see what we can learn from them and see whether we can percolate that to even the downstream user, the supply chain. Yeah, thanks. So we welcome Eric.
So, thank you very much, Mr. Kumra, for this fantastic introduction, setting the scene. Thank you very much for ICC to having me here, and congratulations to this fantastic event. And the question is, why is it so important to talk about sustainability? I think it is really important to talk about sustainability because our world is changing. We face a growing population and growing buying power. In fact, if you continue to consume as we do today, by 2050, with the projected population growth, we need 3 globes to satisfy the world's resource needs. At the same time, environmental issues are becoming more evident, and this is what we discussed this morning extensively. Customers and markets are increasingly aware and sensitive to ethics and sustainability. Governments and regulators require or rate ESGs, aspects of companies. Corporate social responsibility dimensions like ethics, hold a significant weight of importance reputation. More than 60 countries say they'll zero out carbon emissions by 2050. Demand for chemicals, particularly for specialty and bio-based chemicals, is expected to grow tremendously in the next years. In this changing world, sustainability allows us to stay in the driver's seat. It allows us to manage risks and to take up the global challenges, regulatory changes, and stakeholder demands in a forward-looking manner. Please allow me to introduce Clariant to you. Clariant is a global specialty chemicals company with a broadly diversified portfolio of products grouped into 3 business units: care chemicals, catalysis, natural resources. The product range extends from specialties for detergents, personal care, and agricultural products in the care chemicals business area, to industrial catalysts, to additives for the plastics industry, oil services, mining solutions, refinery services, and functional materials. Clariant has a well-established and extensive footprint in India. Clariant in India is headquartered in Navi Mumbai and operates in the business areas care chemicals, natural resources, and catalysis. The company has manufacturing units at various locations in India. With dedicated application centers and state-of-the-art regional innovation center in India, the company aims to co-create tailor-made solutions for the industry. Our purpose-led strategy and related targets set a foundation for the company's path forward. Our purpose is greater chemistry between people and planet. Greater chemistry stands for innovation. It stands for unique solutions that redefine what conventional wisdom considers to be possible. Greater chemistry between people stands for the beauty of interactions between people. Greater chemistry with our customers allows us to go beyond a transactional relationship. And greater chemistry between people also describes our company culture. A culture that actively promotes diversity, inclusiveness, mutual appreciation, and empowerment. And finally, greater chemistry between people and planet means sustainability. It is the greater chemistry that serves a greater purpose. It expresses our ambition to enable the transition towards more sustainable living. And this purpose exactly sets the ground for new financial as well as non-financial targets. I will focus more on the non-financial targets. We have set ourselves challenging targets for the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. For scope 1 and 2, we will reduce the emissions of CO2 until 2030 by 40% based on the 2019 baseline. And the reduction in scope 3, here focusing on category 1, we aim a reduction of 14%. Coming back to our sustainability targets, I already mentioned the GHG reductions. For our sustainable operations, we set reduction targets for the key environmental parameters. In the area of water intake, minus 20%, wastewater, minus 25%, hazardous waste, minus 25%, and landfill non-hazardous waste, minus 40%, and nitrogen oxide emissions, minus 30%. Again, in the time between 2019 and 2030. Creating sustainable values goes beyond our products, solutions, and customers. We are engaging with industry stakeholders and collaborative platforms to build resilient and sustainable value chains and tackle specific challenges with others. Clariant is involved, actively involved, in partnerships such as the World Economic Forum Low Carbon Emitting Technologies Initiative, which aims to accelerate the development and upscaling of low carbon emitting technologies for chemical production. We are a member of the WBCSC as well as a coalition of leading advanced biofuels producers and technology providers, thus contributing to the EU's climate and defossilization ambitions. We are a member of the TFS, collaborating with other companies to manage sustainability in the supply chain already since 2014. And Clariant is a founding member of the Alliance to End Plastic Waste and is engaged in several cross-industry initiatives and associations. Clariant is set up for sustainable innovation. Our proven customer-centric idea to market process comprises 4 basic steps. And here I'm coming now really to the interaction between product stewardship and sustainability. The 4 steps include scout, scope, execute, and commercialize. In the scout phase, we're running a trend analysis. We identify unmet market needs. And as soon as we have a first idea, really a first idea, what could it be? What could solve, what could really create answers? We are running already a first regulatory, as well as toxicological, in most cases a predictive analysis, as well as a first sustainability evaluation. In the second phase, in the scope phase, we are then running detailed interviews with our stakeholders. And later in this stage, we sample our customers, and we are going immediately again for an early stage sustainability review based on the portfolio value program for R&D that we have identified. And we start drafting a regulatory roadmap. You see, it goes hand in hand. This regulatory roadmap sets up the strategy for a potential entry into market. In the execute phase then, we are piloting and testing with lead customers, and we submit the registration dossier to be really ready to go if this solution is approved. And in the commercialized phase, finally, we launch the products, and we monitor very carefully the feedback from customers, and we are there really to give support. As you can see, product stewardship and sustainability are hardwired into our product development process for safe and sustainable innovation. Clariant is fully committed as part of its sustainability strategy to bring products to the market that are safe and have a low environmental impact while maximizing value to consumers and the society. This is why in this final step, we are running really a final PVP assessment. This is the full screening for final sustainability classification, and we try to identify potential candidates for Ecotane. Ecotane branding means really top-in-class, best-in-class performance, our sustainability excellence products. Thus, we are integrating sustainability and product stewardship into the innovation process, and we see this really as a key for our success. In the previous slide, I mentioned the portfolio value program. This is in fact our systematic approach to assess and continuously improve product sustainability performance to drive the transformation of our product portfolio. Clariant was among the early pioneers in the chemical industry to implement already in 2012 a systematic approach to assess and continuously improve the sustainability performance of its products. We continue to demonstrate leadership in this area, and this year, 2022, we implemented a revised version of PVP, considering and anticipating trends, regulations, and stakeholders' demands. All our products undergo a PVP assessment, which is based on 39 sustainability criteria spanning social, environmental, and economic dimensions, and consider a holistic view of the entire life cycle in 8 key sustainability areas that are the GHG emissions, the water consumption, the raw material and transition to bioeconomy, the use of recycled materials and recyclability, safe use, transparency and information, sustainable sourcing, certifications and partnerships, performance advantages, and waste and wastewater generation. By end of 2021, almost 80% of our portfolio have been screened. And more than 90% of our screen portfolio fulfill Clariant's sustainability requirements. By the way, you might ask, and what happens with the rest? The rest is really on its roadmap for substitution. Ecolabel was awarded to over 200 of our products and solutions. So, now I would like to share some examples to let you know how it really works in practice. Brake fluids are high-performance chemicals that need to comply with the highest quality standards to ensure they work when you need them. There are different grades of brake fluids, which are described as .3, 4, and 5. For instance, if you drive a car with an anti-lock braking system, you will require .4 grade. These .4 brake fluids use borate esters, which were developed as key ingredient to ensure performance of the brake fluids over their lifetime. Problem with these borate esters is that they are classified as class 2 reproducts chemicals. And over their lifetime, the borate esters form free borates, which are known to be class 1 reprotoxic compounds. Due to the borate esters and the free borates, finally, the spent brake fluid is a hazardous material requiring extra care when changing the brake fluids and special handling of the waste. Thus, the big challenge was clear. And based on the just explained process, we managed to create the first sustainable .4 borate-free brake fluids, which achieves a state-of-the-art performance exceeding the performance of borate esters containing products on several criteria, which is the first CMR-free, label-free .4 brake fluid. And even we could assign the Ecotane label for this outstanding performance and sustainability performance. It consists of readily biodegradable materials. It has a low carbon footprint and generates no hazardous waste in production or in use. Thus, this product is definitely ready for future. Customers don't have to worry about potential regulatory changes. In my second example, I'd like to show how Clariant is constantly striving to stay ahead of the curve in anticipating both regulatory and market requirements and addressing customers' needs. We are rescreening products against key sustainability themes, reflecting the latest science and regulation. For instance, the upcoming requirements stemming from the microplastics restriction dossier under adoption at EU level defines that microplastics, which are not water-soluble and not biodegradable, will be restricted. Here, Clariant chemically and physically upvalues crude rice bran wax, a non-food competing byproduct of the rice oil production, into its high-performing Lycocare RBW solutions to achieve the properties of our customers' needs. These Lycocare RBW are innovative bio-based wax additives that can replace fossil-based products in plastics, coatings, inks, care, agriculture, and many other applications. This solution contributes to more efficient and energy-saving production and recycling of plastics and is even externally recognized. It received the Best Sustainable Products Award from ICIS in 2020. So, what are my key messages? Number one, to drive value creation with sustainability requires systematic integration of sustainability into the product development process. Second, substitution calls for a holistic sustainability perspective. To ensure improving a product sustainability requires a holistic life cycle-based sustainability assessment, including all knowledge and science from product stewardship of the products. Scientific data remains thus the key assessment criteria for sustainability. And third, collaboration with policymakers and the broader stakeholder community is key to fostering design and innovation and accelerating the transition to a sustainable, low-carbon, and more circular economy. Thus, our industry is faced with significant challenges, but can also benefit from great opportunities to create value for society with low-carbon, circular, and bio-based solutions that are truly safe and sustainable by design. And with this, thank you very much for your attention.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Erika. And now we invite Mr. Kushal Singh to give his speech. Yeah, thank you.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. I hope you are not sleeping after delicious lunch. If you're sleeping, then please wake up because we don't have time to sleep now. As most of the experts highlighted during the day, the clock is ticking and I think we need to take action, right? That's on a side note. I think my topic for the day is slightly different. Most of these speakers actually covered what their organizations are doing, but I'll be talking more about what we as a consortium of companies, together doing in terms of knowledge sharing or bringing best practices, etc. So my topic today would be the PCF, the TFS PCF guidelines, which are specifically created for the chemical industry. I work with Merck, which is a German pharma company, predominantly around 350 years old company with diverse interest into chemicals, electronics, healthcare, and life science, of course. But here I will be representing TFS, being one of the founding members of the TFS. So this is a brief agenda. So we will talk about what TFS is, what are its global work streams, setting the stage around what is this PCF guidelines, why do we need them basically, and then, of course, a little bit future outlook. As I said, TFS is a consortium of about 37 European chemical majors. Dr. Erika, she's here. I think she's also, her company is also one of the founding members of TFS. And their main agenda is basically focused on how they can collaborate together, bring in more transparency into the supply chains for themselves, for the member companies, and also for the suppliers, and how that information can be kind of shared together, rather than kind of reinventing the wheel again and again. And as Sheres mentioned earlier, at the beginning, he said what people in, let's say, in the Western world, in Europe or in the US do, and most of the Indian companies here, they being kind of suppliers for them, whatever regulations come in force there, they in a way kind of become mandatory on all of you. So if you comply with them, you're going to be more successful by default, and if you don't, then naturally you miss the train. These are the 37 companies. You can see the names with a global turnover of about, put together, 500 billion euros and with a global spend of over 300 billion euros. This slide I specifically put in the slides here because I believe there were some misconceptions related to TFS, because TFS is not something which is an Indian consortium, right? And there is something, people spoke about responsible care, and I believe there was some kind of ambiguities in the mind that, responsible care and TFS, they are kind of competitors, but that's not the case. You can see on the slide, I think they share a very common kind of goal, and I specifically wanted to highlight this so that tomorrow if you get a request from any of your customers based in Europe or in the US to go for EcoVadis assessments or TFS audits, you should not say that, no, that's not something, and you're already part of responsible care, for example. Idea is also to see how some of the potential players from India, Indian chemical industry, they can also become, let's say, members of TFS, initiative. Not only, you don't only then look for the assessments or the audits, but also you play a very key role in terms of what is required for the industry then. I also wanted to give you a brief idea about the India structure because we started this India chapter in 2016. I recently joined this. As you can see here, India chapter is headed by Rajiv Gaur, who is a global head of procurement for Lanxess, based in Mumbai. And then we have 5 work streams, as you can see on the top right-hand corner. I am heading the work stream number 5, which is focused more on greenhouse gas emissions, predominantly on scope 3. And all these 16 companies in India, they are the members again. But there's no local or Indian company as of now who is part of TFS initiative. And I would request each one of you, those who consider themselves worthy of becoming part of this, they should, So when we talk about PCF, I think on some of the occasions this term was used today, and I hope that most of you are aware of this term PCF. This is product carbon footprint, and what critical role this is going to play in future for each one of you, being, let's say the majority of the supplier base for most of the Western countries, let's say. So I think in some of the cosmetics, maybe some of the ladies would know that it is already started appearing now, some kind of information which talks about the complete transparency, like how much carbon footprint this particular product is associated with. And so basically during the entire life cycle of each product, how much carbon emissions are created, that is something which is then quantified in terms of product carbon footprint. As you can see in the slide, there are various stages, and at each stage, right from, let's say, manufacturing, and then go upstream up to the, the first supplier, for example, or maybe the mine or the raw material. Throughout the supply chain, you see emissions getting added at each stage. And at the end of the day, when the final product is ready for the end use, you should be able to kind of see and compare, which product is having what value of product carbon footprint, and based on that, then you can decide which product you want to buy. And then that way you can then actually affect or, kind of influence this entire carbon emission, kind of system which is there. Now this is a challenge because, as most of you heard during the day, this is predominantly scope 3 emissions, and measuring scope 3 emissions is not an easy task. There's so many different players involved, multiple layers are there, and I think that really makes it very, very challenging. And earlier, as I said, for MAC, for example, if I source something from India, for me, my scope 3 emissions are basically your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, right? So for you, this is very critical to kind of, identify and measure your scope 1 and 2 emissions. And similarly, for you to be kind of, compliant with scope 1, 2, and 3, you also need to know the emissions of your suppliers. And this is a kind of cascading, it's a chain reaction. So unless you reach the final or the origin of the product, the raw material basically, you can't really say that, yeah, you're free of the emissions. And also some of the speakers said that, the chemical industry, of course, globally, they contribute close to about 7% emissions. And out of that, 77% emissions constitute scope 3 emissions. So you can understand how critical it would be to kind of measure and assess these scope 3 emissions. So as I said, the solution is something which TFS worked together. They put together some guidelines which will help the industry, the chemical industry, in terms of identifying and then calculating the product carbon footprint. You might wonder that, do we have something already in place? Yes, there was something like greenhouse gas protocol, which also kind of gives you an idea about how to calculate it, but that's something which is not focused on any particular sector. Those guidelines are quite generic, and they may not really help you to kind of very accurately calculate your emissions. And that's why TFS, using various experts from the industry, various government agencies, NGOs, various people came together, they collaborated together, and then they kind of, tailored this solution which suits to the requirements of the chemical industry specifically. And this is something which is available to all. It's not something which is like, you need to be a member of TFS or something. This is available to all. I'll show you where you can actually download those guidelines and see how you can make use of them. As I said, this is a kind of quite collaborative kind of approach which we adopted here. And now those guidelines are available. Here you can see. Those guidelines are available. You can download them and then see for yourself. And as I said, there are 5 work streams. I specifically represent work stream number 5, which is focused on scope 3 emissions. And then within that also we had 5 chapters. 1 to 4 are not really related to scope 3 emissions, so that's why we are not really talking about it. But chapter 5 is fully dedicated to these guidelines. You can download and see for yourself. You can also see some of the agencies like World Business Council for Sustainability Development. They are also part of this, and they have kind of vetted and ratified these guidelines. They are also compliant with ISO guidelines, so you don't really need to kind of worry about how many times different guidelines you'll follow. So if you follow these guidelines, you don't really need to follow other kind of guidelines for that. You also saw this slide earlier in a different form, of course, when we spoke about cradle-to-gate approach. So there are 2 major approaches which are adopted mostly. One is cradle-to-gate and the other one is cradle-to-grave. So cradle-to-grave is something which covers the entire life cycle, of course, but cradle-to-gate is something which is from, let's say, upstream suppliers to our manufacturing operations. So once the product is ready, then we don't really talk about downstream, which is because of the supplier, which is because of the customers, let's say. So this particular guidelines, this is applicable only to, cradle-to-gate kind of setup and not to cradle-to-grave. And we don't even think of kind of, developing it further at the moment, because although, as all of you know, I think for all practical purposes, even for creation of your, P&L or whatever, I think everything ends at your manufacturing and not beyond that. You don't really care how your customers are actually, taking that. So that's why we want to limit it only to cradle-to-gate kind of approach. As I said, this is a kind of, this is more like a decision tree, which will help you to take a decision, how you can make use of these guidelines. This is a bit of a technical stuff, and I don't think it'll make any sense to kind of talk about this. Some of the speakers also spoke about carbon capturing methods here earlier. I think Savik spoke about that, right? So I will skip this slide here then. And then another thing, which is something work in progress right now, is data sharing solution. This is we are already kind of running a pilot right now, and hopefully by next year, this solution should be available. And this then can, something like TFS, for example, when I was talking about TFS. So if you get an EcoBodies assessment done, for all member companies, they can share or they can see the same results, and you don't really need to kind of, honor 10 different requests for that. So something similar will happen here. So once you have this tool available, I think once you have your product carbon footprint ready, you share this here, you don't really need to kind of, adopt different methods how to share this. So this is still work in progress, so hopefully by next year we'll see something there. And I don't know how we are doing on the time, because then I could also show 3 slides, which are the benefits to the TFS members, if you want. How are we doing on the time? Okay. So I just quickly show you what are the benefits of being a TFS member. There are 3 different stakeholders, as you can see: procurement, supplier community, and sales and CSR people. For procurement, these are the benefits. Everything is standardized, simplified. There's a accountability and responsibility and sharing. For the supplier community, as I said, you don't really need to kind of use your resources multiple times, so that really improves your efficiency, and also creates business opportunities for you. And finally, for the sales force or for the CSR people, it kind of makes you more compliant, and that way really you have an edge over others. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kushal. Yeah, now we invite Mr. Rahul to say his speech. Yeah.
Good afternoon all. I'm Rahul Yadav. I represent Gujarat Fluorochemical. I serve as a regulatory compliance manager in Gujarat Fluorochemical. And today's topic, product stewardship going beyond regulatory compliance. This topic itself defines what actually product stewardship in comprehensive principle should be. It should be beyond regulatory. And when, okay. The usual common definition associated with what is product stewardship is the act of minimizing the health, safety, environment, and social impact of product and its packaging throughout all the life cycle stages, while also maximizing economic benefit. The major stress over here is throughout the life cycle stage. And the usual conventional approach, usually what happens, the product stewardship function within an organization, especially in Indian context, is seen as a regulatory compliance division. Basically, whether we are complying with REACH regulations, whether we have safety data sheets in place, whether we have proper labeling, let it be a product labeling, transport labeling, all these regulatory compliances which are essential to run the businesses are part of function of product stewardship. No doubt they are part of product stewardship function. However, the product stewardship is much more than only meeting the regulatory compliances. And basically, if we apply product stewardship in totality, it will also be a key enabler, a key instrument which will help us to meet our sustainable development goals. For example, Indian Chemical Council, under its flagship initiative of responsible care, endorses a comprehensive product stewardship principles. Product stewardship principles, if you see on the screen, it starts from responsible sourcing, identifying the suppliers, applying the green chemistry principles, best available techniques for during the sustainable manufacturing, hazard communication, and product safety. These are the 2 parts right now we are focused in within the product stewardship community. And then the end of life, how you dispose the product, whether there is a possibility to reuse it, and then it goes back to responsible sourcing. Possibly right now we are focused on the cradle to gate approach, but with the circular economy coming into the picture, we are trying to come up with a process which should be cradle to cradle. And probably product stewardship could be a very good instrument to achieve that. Right now, these are the key principles. These are around 10 principles. Looking at the time constraint, I would restrict myself in the principle of prioritization, product risk characterization, risk management measures, value chain communications. Hopefully with this presentation, I would be able to give you some tools which will help us to, achieve our sustainability goals. Sustainable supply chain. What I foresee that supplier information is a lifeblood of a sustainability program. As correctly mentioned that we are the scope 3 for probably a Western world, for Europe or US. But in this supply chain, someone is also our supply chain. For example, my manufacturing unit is in Dahej, or is in Bharuch or in Ankleshwar. Over there are small, medium enterprises. We need to get the supplier information for them. So for us to get the supplier information, it's very important to have a supplier engagement. For us, probably, we are the crowd, we are the audience who are much educated about the sustainable practices. But what are the other functions? For example, marketing and sales doesn't know what is the scope 1 and scope 2. They don't know how to calculate scope 3. We talk in length about scope 3. But how does our supplier knows what does it mean by scope 3? Especially the MSME part of our industry. So identifying and tracking source of all ingredients are very important. And the tools for the screening, tools for achieving that sustainable supply chain information is that supply chain engagement. It's very key for us. Training them, having a supplier regulatory questionnaires. Not only making the regulatory questionnaires, we also need to educate them why we need these regulatory questionnaires. Probably after understanding that, they will come up with the accuracy of the supply chain information which they give to us. And we have ISO 20400 sustainable procurement policies. Probably we can take the benefit of those best principles of ISO 20400 procurement policy, embedded with the regulatory questionnaires, and educate the customers with the continuous supplier audits. So this will help us to get the important information. Once we get the information, we can then make an informed decision whether this supplier is providing me the product carbon footprint scope 1, scope 2. Okay, if it is giving me scope 1, scope 2, how hazardous is this chemical? And are there any alternatives to that? So this is a very key part of the prioritization. Second, the commercial product screening. Once we define our product, but there is a possibility, for example, I have one product with 4 key ingredients, and one of the key ingredients has the possibility to come under the persistent organic pollutant list or SVHC list of Europe. Before becoming a restricted, they come up with a draft solution that we have the intention to put this chemical under this so-and-so restrictive list. So with the continuous screening, we will come to know, okay, this product has the possibility, or this ingredient has the possibility of being restricted. So let's reformulate it in advance, proactively, so my supply chain will not be disrupted, my business will be not disrupted. So it is very important to have continuous risk assessment. Apart from that, having a customer feedback is also very important, and it comes under the product stewardship. So benefits are proactive and safer changes in product reformulation. Sometimes voluntary restrictions we can also put on. For example, we come from industry where we give our products to a few of the food contact materials industries, which are very, very heavily restricted. So if we are aware that probably, let's say, bisphenol is going to be restricted, so let's say we will voluntarily not enter into the food contact material, probably we will go into some other market. So those kind of informed decision which management might take will come through the product stewardship, and we will guide the management that this is the possibility. Probably it might be better that we go to some other applications. Product risk characterization. Ideally, product risk characterization is product risk identification. Before going ahead of product risk identification, how to do that, I want to set a context of product risk characterization, why it is so important. Currently, the ESG reporting structure, which we have for chemical industry, it is revolving around the end of the pipe, reactive modes. For example, what are the emissions, spills, reputational risk associated with the chemical accidents? Okay, they are very important for ESG reporting to make an assessment about an organization. However, if we shift our focus in the front-end chemical selection and product design, we might end up with the product which will be inherently safer which will avoid this reputational risk or emissions and spills. So that's where the safer chemistry plays a very important role. As our speaker said that about EU Green Deal. EU Green Deal is a very ambitious deal of Europe, that it's a legislative instrument by way of which they are trying to get 2050 goal of carbon neutrality. By 2030, they want to reduce their emission by 55%. But this EU Green Deal is also not talking only about the carbon. If you see on the screen, they want to have a zero pollution, toxic-free environment, mobilizing industry for circular economy. Under EU Green Deal, there is a chemical strategy for sustainability. As our previous speaker said, that safe and sustainable by design. They are coming up with this one draft, probably it's still under the draft provision, that if you apply safe and sustainable by design criteria, it will be a one substance, one assessment. If your product passes through that assessment of safety, process safety, environment and health exposure, LCA, social responsibility, all these parameters will be taken care of. So it's a very comprehensive document. And since Europe is the chief regulator of the world, for example, REACH regulation, ROHS regulation was first introduced by Europe, and later on, with the various versions, it got adopted in US, Japan, Australia, you name any country, but the real model regulation always comes from Europe. So this safe and sustainable by design criteria, if we adopt it, probably we will be much ahead in the curve of applying the green principle chemistries. Product risk characterization, chemical footprint reduction. We talked in very great deal about the carbon footprint. What about the chemical footprint? When I say chemical footprint, chemical of concerns in your product supply chain. How to identify chemical of concern in product supply chain and how to reduce. These are the probable action plan which can help us. It's identify and prioritize chemical of concern within your chemical inventory. Substitute chemical of concerns, and where substitutions are not possible, put a risk management measures which will reduce the impact. Identify and prioritize chemical of concerns. So there is a very good public literature available by a US NGO called Greenpeace. They have come up with a very methodological, systemic way to identify which are the chemical of concerns. They have around 20 to 30 endpoints, health hazard endpoints, environmental health points. And if you go through all those parameters, you will come to know how many of your product or supply chain raw materials are chemical of concerns. Let's say out of 300, your 25 chemicals you have identified that they are chemicals of concern. So what will you do with that? So next step is substitute them. How will we substitute? For that, another public literature is available, which is very comprehensive, which is developed by International Chemical Secretariat of Europe. Basically, it gives a list which is developed for how many chemicals have the possibility to come under restriction and what are their possible substitution available already in the market. It's completely free and it's called a SIN list. So this can be explored while doing the substitution part. Now coming to the life cycle assessment. Since this is a sustainability conclave, everybody is talking about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Majorly what I have seen that it's revolving around the PCF, product carbon footprint. But when you truly apply the life cycle assessment principles based on the ISO standard 14040, if you see on the screen, there are 10 to 12 different parameters, not only carbon footprint. For example, toxicity, ozone depletion potential, water depletion potential, primary energy demand. So once you do the life cycle assessment of a product, it gives you the data where is the maximum environmental load or social load is happening on your product. For example, we have one product, manufacturing, there are 4 manufacturing steps. So once you do the LCA assessment of those products, you will come to know that my stage 3 is emitting the maximum carbon footprint. So probably instead of doing for entire cycle, you directly approach to the step 3 and use the renewable energy resources on the step 3 of the manufacturing process. By this way, you will greatly reduce the requirement of renewable energy because it is right now at the current stage, we do not have ample of renewable energy resources and which are also not very cheap to, to cater all our needs of energy intensive processes. Once we have done the risk identification, risk characterization, the results which we got, the data which we got, it will help us to facilitate to make the informed decisions. For example, the decisions could be engineering control measures, which revolves with your product safety. Emission controls, as I said, which is the maximum impact producing part of your manufacturing unit. Over here, you can use the renewable energy goals, you can link up with them. Guidance to the customer about end user, how to safely use your product, which comes under the responsible sales and marketing. Then product reformulation, repackaging, part of your regulatory compliance. Voluntary restriction, it will enhance your reputation, it will reduce your regulatory risks. Feasibility of recycling and reuse and unused product about circular economy. Over here, I want to emphasize, if in this design phase itself, we have a safer chemistry, so during the circular part, during the recycling part, it will be much easier to recycle them. For example, I have one product, which is carcinogenic, persistent, bioaccumulative in nature. So during recycling phase, a recycler will always have a question, how many hazardous chemical it has? If there are no hazardous chemical, or let's say 2 or 3 hazardous chemicals which are very less hazardous, for example, skin sensitizer or acute toxicity category 4 harmful is followed, in that case, they will say, okay, let's go and do the recycling part because there is no inherent risk involved with the product. So during the product designing phase, if we go and choose a raw material which is greener, less hazardous, it will help us to move from linear economy to circular economy. Value chain communication and cooperation. Basically, what I mean by that is a regulatory advocacy part. It is a very key aspect of product stewardship or any function of product stewardship. For example, as Mr. Kumra said, that Indian Chemical Management Safety Rule, India is looking to build a REACH-like concept like India REACH, which is currently, I think, in the 5th draft. So over there, industry was consciously asked, what are your inputs? That is the time where a product stewardship professional can come into the place and can say, probably REACH is good for Europe. As Sir said, that during the inception of the EU REACH, they did not have any data. Now we have the data. So do we have to model that regulation? Probably not. We can take a leverage of their ECA database, and we can come up with the system. For example, we will, let's say, right now in the draft, there are 2 stages, notification and the registration of priority substance. So let's go with the notification, and later on, gradually, as our industry understands what are the requirements, then move up with the more and more stringent part of the applying that regulation or modeling that regulation. So there is the part where we, as product stewardship function, come up and represent our industry. Second, join a product stewardship group. What we see, especially in our continent, in our country, product stewardship, there are no communities as if now, if I see that which is revolving about or which is dealing about the product stewardship. There are no readily available networking groups where you can go and you can sit together and discuss about the product stewardship matters. So this is one thing where a product stewardship function should proactively be engaged, probably go through the webinars, attend trade shows like this, where they get the more ideas. And we have to be on the continuous vigilant on the regulatory actions, NGO campaigns, specifically to our industry. For example, I represent the fluoropolymer industry, so I need to know what are the major regulations which can impact the fluoropolymer industry. So the value chain communication is also a very key aspect of the product stewardship. As we all agree that we cannot foresee what is coming in the pipeline, let it be sustainability goals or regulatory actions, which chemicals, probably we do not have enough of data to classify a product carcinogenic, but after 10 years, 15 years, with some additional data or scientific input, it could be endocrine disruptors, it could be a carcinogenic. So we cannot anticipate all the things in advance, but yes, with the networking, engaging with the stakeholders, learning, we can, develop a robust product stewardship program. So as I said, the product stewardship, first of all, need to be understood that it's not just a regulatory compliance division. Second, it's a continuous evolving function. You have to be continuously learning and upgrading yourself. So as I said on the presentation, that it's not a process, it's not a process, it's not a destination, it's a journey. So take it as a product stewardship as a journey beyond the regulatory compliance. So with this I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Yeah. we have time for the questions, yeah, okay. Yeah. Is there any questions from the floor? Yeah, you can raise your hand. Well, I can, in meanwhile, have one question to the panel, and maybe everybody could give their opinion on it. It's a small, simple question. Is that, I mean, we talked about, going beyond regulation and product stewardship. Companies like you that you have shared, you are doing much more beyond regulation without having a local regulation here in India in that case. But can we actually come to a success level, the type of success we expect from the sector, which is like maybe around 4,000, 5,000 companies in India probably or more, that can all come to the same level in a voluntary basis, or there needs to be an element of mandatory basis on that? Do you get what I'm trying to say? So, I mean, has to be there a regulation, or without regulation we can achieve where you have achieved the levels so far, each of you? Please.
I think this is really an excellent question. And I think the answer is yes and no. Honestly speaking, there are a lot of companies that are committed to follow. They're implementing today already the GHS in India, although it is not yet regulated. They are having supply chain communications to other regions that are regulated. We are in a global world. And if you really want to go for global business, you have to comply and you have to understand what is the implication of what you are doing. Because you cannot just see a country in isolation. Therefore, it is a no, we don't need in this case. On the other hand, if you want to go broad, to cover all the SMEs that are local manufacturers, local producers, then you have to say yes. Because they do not see the need to go in their supply chain. They have no dependency on this. And if you really want to create a momentum, then it is yes.
This is possible, subject to change in the mindset, because I think as of now, most of us, including maybe me, you, everyone, we think that this is not my responsibility. Someone will do it, right? Maybe government will do it, maybe the organizations will do it, but unless we have that change in mindset, it gets into our DNA, and then we start doing this in each and everything on day-to-day basis. Then in that case, it is possible without any kind of regulations. On the other hand, I think I also mentioned that those who don't really, upgrade or upskill and do these things, they are preparing to miss the bus actually, because this will become a mandatory requirement. Whether European companies are asking for it or Indian government is asking for it, but you have to do it. Tomorrow there'll be no choice about it, basically.
I have input on this. For example, it's a classic example and practical example is that India was one of the first signatory members to adopt a globally harmonized system. We were the first to say yes, that we are going to adopt GHS for safety data sheet. But I think, except India, most of the regulatory, our counterparts for our regulatory parts, they have adopted the GHS. Europe has adopted the GHS. US has adopted the GHS. In India, we have, even though being the first signatory members, we are still in the road to adopt the GHS standards for the safety data sheet. Second, even though we have not made it official, but still Indian companies are complying, those who are focused on exports. Third, in this case, what about the small enterprises who are only dealing within the chemical ecosystem of India? They are not doing it, and they are not required to do it. But as a responsible organization, it is our responsibility, it is a responsibility of forums like this, that we educate our SMEs. Because at the end of the day, if we come up with a regulation and we do it with the force of legislative instruments, it is going to cost them. So we also have to make sure that how we balance, that probably we will do it in the partial way, we will do it gradual way, but immediate intervention of legislative instrument, as you said, sir, would be kind of very harsh for small, medium enterprises in India. So it should be in the gradual phases. So yes, it's required, but it should be done in the gradual phases.
Thanks. Thanks, yeah, please.
This is also a question of collaboration. I think the big players, since we are talking about MSMEs also, or maybe some small players, I think they cannot be just left in the lurch for want of the regulations, because as he said, it'll cost money, resources, and which they may not have. So many big players, and I'm sure that in India we have many big players for that matter. They need to come forward, maybe they need to support them. I think most of the global companies, they're very keen to support and collaborate with their suppliers and partners. I think the same approach is required for by the local players also.
Thank you. I think it's a very nice set of answers we have for the same question. And I mean, nothing is absolute right and nothing is absolute wrong, as most of you said. But I mean, obviously, in many cases, when we are complying without a regulation, especially from India to other countries, it's primarily because it's driven by the regulation in that country. So basically, what happens is very interesting thing that I want to just end this small, session, because I see restlessness here. So I understand. So the thing is that the issue is not whether the regulation will be implemented properly or not. The issue is when your product becomes difficult to sell. So the idea is that product-based regulation are something that is a total different thing than the type of regulations that we know from the past. So the moment you have a regulation on your product, which becomes such that your only downstream user, your buyer would buy from you, provided you have complied with it, or provided it has particular, qualification, like you have reach registration number or some sort of notification number, then automatically everybody falls in line. So I have seen, it was mentioned we represent around 1,500 odd companies, and 70% of my clients are from India, and most of them are small and medium-sized enterprises, and many of them have complied with the European REACH regulation. So it is not that, it is difficult for them, but I think there has to be a motivation, there has to be a drive, and I think regulation can be the basic minimum level that you need to meet. Above that, it is your stewardship that you do beyond as you want to go, as much you can go. So there has to be a minimal level. Sorry.
Perhaps to add one further idea, safety, and this is more or less what is regulated, is the first start for any assessment of sustainability. If we really aim to go for sustainability, we have to first to go for safety.
Absolutely, well said. Yeah, with this we close this session. Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks everybody. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. I think compliance of, we need to give you a token of our appreciation. So compliance or coercion, this is a very key thing in that. And sometimes we feel, we talk a lot about our colonial mindset. In the colonial mindset, unless until a coercion is there, the compliance is less. But we are all increasing in that. So with this, I would like Mr. Kumra to hand over the memento to the panelists. And then I would request Mr. P.S. Singh, Secretary of the Northern Region, to hand over a memento to the chair, Mr. Kumra. So thank you very much.